Believe me when I tell you that I am not here to hype up AI. If you know anything about me, you know that I wrote a book called The Loop: How AI is Creating a World Without Choices and How to Fight Back. And it is extremely critical of the whole thing. In my view, we should not be using AI to decide who gets a job and who gets a loan. We shouldn't be using it to simulate romantic relationships. We shouldn't be using it in the way that we are doing. So I really hope you will believe me when I say I'm not here to hype up what's going on in AI. But I do think it's really important to know what's happening in AI because of the progress it's making and the ways in which it's, totally unregulated, and as a result, moving without any kind of friction at all into all these different corners of our lives. Both Google and OpenAI are currently making their pitch to the Trump administration, basically saying we should be allowed to vacuum up the entire internet's worth of digital content without having to think about copyright or intellectual property or any of that. So, we're in a pretty fast moving moment, and that's why it's so important to know about this next turn of the wheel, and it's called Model Context Protocol, or MCP. If you are an AI developer, you know about this already. Why, if you're an AI developer and you're on this channel, awesome, thank you, welcome. But for the rest of us, right, who are just sort of following this along as civilians, it's worth just sort of knowing what this is. So Model Context Protocol is referred to by its acronym MCP. And I just want to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. I don't know why it is that these companies continue to use references inadvertently or on purpose to like science fiction nightmare scenarios, but for some reason they do. So I don't know if you remember Stargate, the show back in the 90s. OpenAI and the consortium of people, including Masayoshi Son and Larry Ellison from Oracle, they're building this big infrastructure program around AI under the Trump administration. They're calling it Stargate. And I'm sure they thought that was cute, but I don't know if you remember, but Stargate, the show, is all about a really annoying race of basically sort of techno gods who use these stargates, these transportation, sort of teleportation systems to basically grab slave labor from across the universe. So that's a weird branding exercise. MCP, that acronym that's what the bad guy is in Tron, Master Control Program. I don't know if you remember this, but right, the sort of the self-aware video game development system that then becomes the sort of, the evil bad guy in the, in the show. Anyway, I don't know why they keep doing that. But anyway, basically almost a year ago, November of last year, whatever that is, 8 months ago, Anthropic, one of the big companies that is making foundational models, there's OpenAI, there's Google, there's Facebook, and Anthropic is one of them, released this system, not Master Control Program, Model Context Protocol, MCP. And what MCP does is it basically makes it so that you don't have to tell an AI system what tools to implement in trying to figure out the solution to a thing. Rather than you having to go and point it at an arsenal of options as to what, tools it can rely on, what databases it can go look into, you can instead, using Model Context Protocol, you can essentially say, I need you to do this thing, and you can rely on any one of all of these servers that have been set up, these MCP servers, which wind up being a kind of all-purpose way for an AI system to go and connect to whatever it needs to accomplish its task. So if you're a developer right now, and you set up an MCP server, let's say to, try and pull together out of a database, the birth dates and essential information, of a group of employees. In the old days, you would have had to go tell it specifically what to look for and how to do it. But in this case, you can not only point it at that server and say, go ahead and do this however you want. What's crazy about this system is that MCP servers now, when you set one up, other people can, in theory, access them as well with their own AI projects, so that every time somebody builds an MCP server, anybody basically using this protocol can connect to it and get what they want. So suddenly you have, the fashion in AI for a long time now, for a couple of years, has been talking about agents, agentic AI. And what that means is not just a closed system like an LLM, a large language model like OpenAI's ChatGPT, that you can just have a conversation with and it just sort of knows what it knows from the internet. Instead, what the developers want is a way for the AI to go out into the world and do what it needs to do and grab what it needs to grab, and in the end, sort of make choices for itself in a more sophisticated way. Now, I don't mean to suggest here that this means that this is like it's becoming a sentient thing. I'm going to get to that in a second. There's some feelings I have about that, but we're not there yet. But what this does allow people to do is create systems that truly can kind of act on their own initiative. You still have to be, you still got to understand what you're doing. You still have to know how to deploy code. You still have to be able to, run this program, but it can do a lot of things, help do a lot of things. MCP makes a lot of things possible. So Anthropic, that same company, has also now released a research tool called Claude Code. And what Claude Code lets you do is essentially explain in layman's terms what you want to build, what you want to code. I'd like, an app for rating the spiciest foods in a given city. And that piece of code, Claude Code, can essentially just start doing that using MCP in a way that's much, much faster and much, much easier than having to code it yourself. You can literally just type in the words, please build me an application that rates the spiciest possible restaurants in Oakland, California, right? And it will simply go out and begin trying to do that. It will act as an agent and begin going out and trying to get that done. And not only, this is the crazy part, I had lunch with somebody the other day who's in this world, and they were just explaining to me in terms, it was really like they had watched an incredible magic show or something. They just couldn't stop raving to me about how amazing this thing is. That it can not only build the thing you are describing, the spiciness rating system app that you're describing, it will then publish it, put it out into the world, and then, here's the crazy part, it will begin revising itself to make itself better over time. So it'll create a 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 version of it without you having to go back and figure all of that out. In the past, when you tried to use a piece of AI to code something for you, it would take you about, it could take you about 75%, 80% of the way there, but then you had to do all of this work to get it across the finish line. And, to me, what's so extraordinary about this is that you're no longer in that position. Suddenly you are in a place where you're not having to, really think about what mistakes this thing might have made. You're not having to crawl through lines and lines and lines of code to fix it. It will really do that. So I know I'm going on and on here and we're kind of in the weeds, but let me just explain overall why this is so important. I was having dinner with somebody the other day and they were complaining about how their daughter is not interested in becoming a coder or a lawyer or an engineer. She wants to be an artist. And he was really, sort of upset about it. And I was saying to him, I don't know, man, like, have you seen what's going on with lawyers and engineers and architects and now coders? That skill set isn't really a distinguishing characteristic in the marketplace anymore. Like more and more and more, because we live in this world in which there are no regulations around this stuff and nobody's resisting the tide of AI that is pulling us all out into this new water, people are just going for it with this stuff. And as a result, we really could be in a world where you won't need to know how to code, really, to build products. And so the idea that anybody is going to actually pay you to do that is pretty far-fetched. When I wrote The Loop, I thought I was like 10 years early on the kind of stuff I was predicting, that we would sort of lose all these jobs and we would lose all these skills. But it's happening right now. So much so, that these companies are, and you have to take it with a grain of salt because it benefits these companies to make these predictions, but these companies are truly predicting the end of coding. And the idea that instead you need to get better at learning how to sort of explain things in text. So we're just sort of in that crazy world. Now, does all of this lead to some kind of Terminator scenario? I don't think so, but we are definitely in a different place than we were when we were just using these systems to write wedding vows and tell us knock-knock jokes. We are entering a world in which they really are beginning to reach out and communicate with the world around them and understand the context such that they know how to adapt their tactics to a problem in front of them. And that, there was just a piece of video that went around a week or so ago of two pieces of AI, one of them acting as a personal assistant and the other acting as a customer service representative, talking by phone. The personal assistant is calling to book a hotel room, and the sort of customer service person from the hotel is answering. Once the two of them, and you can hear it in the conversation, once the two of them agree, oh, you're an AI, I'm an AI, they switch to a different form of communication, a beep boop kind of form of communication that's much faster than having to talk back and forth through an LLM. And that moment where sort of we're at, where these processes are going to sort of sink out of sight underneath our skill set, underneath our conscious awareness, such that these agents begin to move around in our modern world sort of on their own to do our bidding, that is a new turn of the wheel. So again, I'm not here to hype this up. I'm certainly not here to panic anybody. And I'm not here to tell you that this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm here just to tell you that this is happening. It's happening very quickly, and it's changing the landscape for jobs. It's changing the landscape for marketable skills, and it's changing the landscape around what you and I are going to expect from technological systems in even the next 6 months to a year.
Thanks everyone for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support, and we will see you next time.